I thought our IDC chair will welcome us first before I take over, or I should just go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. I was thinking you go ahead and I give the closing remarks as I give the vote of thanks.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
That's fine, all right. Okay, let me, on behalf of the IDCA Africa, welcome all of us to the African Day Literacy webinar for 2023. And it's a big pleasure to have all of us come together before September the 8th, when we'll be celebrating the International Day of Literacy. So today's webinar, we have very, very powerful speakers. And we would like to introduce our first speaker to us so that she can set the ball rolling. It's my pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Hellen Inyega, who is going to give us the first presentation. So, Prof, if you don't mind, can you turn on your video so we can see you while we say a little thing about you? Okay. I thought Hellen would show us her face first before. Hellen show us? We'd like to see Helen's face first, if you don't mind.
Can you not see me?
Oh, I've seen Hellen.
There
now.
you are.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay. So that is Hellen Inyega. Hellen is an associate professor and consultant of language, literacy, numeracy, teacher education, and learning assessment. Hellen has over 30 years of experience in the education sector, and she's involved in a lot of projects with a lot of international organizations, including but not limited to African Development Bank, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, CODE, GPE, IDRC, LEGO, MasterCard, USAID, UNICEF, and the World Bank. Hellen's expertise is in the area of design, development, and dissemination of instructional materials and resources for teacher professional development, classroom instruction and literacy, numeracy, and social and emotional learning assessment. She's been involved in training and developing capacities for program directors, CEOs, senior Minister of Education personnel, educators, and performance management of multicultural and international staff for impact in education. Her experience spans through developing, managing, and overseeing national strategies, program systems, and structures commensurate with user-friendly research tools for demonstrating results and value of programming. Hellen has excellent skills in fundraising, partnership development, and relations management, and in particular, nurturing partnerships with both state and non-state actors, and effectively managing relations with development partners. She has conducted numerous organizational capacity assessments, sharing gap analysis, and prioritizing capacity development and strengthening of capacity gaps and issues for accomplishing organization strategies. Hellen is an external examiner, of course, to several universities, including but not limited to the University of Pretoria in South Africa, University of Botswana, Cape Peninsula University of Technology, South Africa, Machakos University in Kenya. She is an advisor for Innovation for Poverty Actions Research Desertification Initiative, a board member of State House Girls in Kenya, and parent representative, Notre Dame School in Kenya, board member, Africa Higher Education Research Initiative, member of International Literacy Association. And I'm very aware that she was the chair of the, if not, is it 8th PAFA conference in Nairobi? Of course, a member of the Association of Reading of Kenya and a multilingual education network for Eastern Africa. It is my pleasure to welcome, to speak to us on accelerating learning through innovative literacy assessment practices, Dr. Hellen Inyega. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, for that introduction. I am excited to be here today to be sharing with us some insights about accelerating learning through innovative literacy assessment practices. I have been in the literacy space for quite some time, actually since 2006. And so really I have seen lots of changes in the region. What I'm going to share here within the 30 minutes assigned to me is really just a slice of the many beautiful things that are happening in regards to innovative literacy assessment practices. I'm wanting to see if I'm able to go to the next slide. If not, I will. Usually technology decides to let you down. Let me move away from, let me see. Let me try again. Okay. So to begin with, I would like just to give us a bit of highlights on, you cannot talk about innovative literacy assessment practices without putting in perspective the idea of literacy. And so traditionally, of course, literacy used to be considered as the ability to read and write, but more recently it has evolved and actually encompasses a multidimensional aspect. For example, viewing, apart from reading and writing, we also are looking at listening, speaking, viewing, in the advent of technology, and performing. So when you think about assessment, you have to think about assessments not only now of reading, but you have to think about assessment of writing, of listening, of speaking, viewing, and performing, amongst the other cultural and societal factors that can actually facilitate or constrain literacy development. So in essence, this multidimensional definition therefore requires educators or even policymakers to conceptualize literacy in a very complex way. Fortunately or unfortunately, more research on assessment of reading has been done in comparison with the other literacy skills that I've already identified. So unfortunately, again, the examples in this presentation therefore narrow their focus onto reading, while appreciating that literacy is more than reading. It includes writing, listening, speaking, viewing, and performing. Now, when we narrow down further to the types of literacy assessments, the different types will depend on the purpose. Why are you wanting to undertake the assessments? And you also have to look into the issue of what tools are you using to undertake the assessment. And number three, do the people who administer the assessments have the requisite skills? And what educational decisions need to be made in regards to the type of assessment, as well as what is the use of those literacy assessments? How are they going to improve teaching and learning? Of course, there are controversies around literacy assessments, but that is not the aim of my discussion. I want just to point out that when richness of literacy is overly simplified by assessments that are not multidimensional, then we get into problems. Or if they're not authentic, then we can get into problems. For example, there has been the overuse of multiple choice questions. That would be one of the areas. So when you think about different types, of course, we have formal assessments, formal literacy assessments. These are used to form a plan to improve learning. That's why they're called formal assessments. You will see in other quarters, they are referred to as assessment for learning. These are used by a teacher in a classroom to help the children to learn. So they are ongoing as the term or the semester progresses. They form a plan of action for the teacher to improve learning. They could also be assessment as learning, which are used by the children themselves. And I'll talk a little bit later on about the importance of having children also assess their own learning and monitor their own learning, which is much more sustainable than any teacher-led assessments. Before leaving this part, I wanted to also throw in the spanner the high-stakes standardized tests that we may have heard about. There's been a push lately in Africa, and I've seen this push in Kenya with the Ministry of Education, where they are encouraging us to undertake the PISA-D, PISA for development. It's an assessment, it's a high-stakes standardized assessment test. So we know that they have a place. So usually we have the criterion reference test that can be used to measure how children are doing in reference to a fixed set of predetermined criteria for learning standards. In my country, Kenya, we are having the competency-based curriculum, and one way would be to use that criterion reference test. So they have a particular set of milestones the learners need to be able to achieve for them to be able to determine whether they have met the expectation or exceeded the expectation. So there is a predetermined criteria or learning standards they have to aspire towards. Of course, these tests require that these standards are, specified earlier on, and the students should be able to meet them as they progress in the teaching and learning process. We also have, we also have the normative assessments, where of course we focus on a particular norm. So perhaps there is a certain cutoff points that children need to meet, and therefore you are able to determine whether or not the students are meeting that norm that has been set. Maybe how are other students of a similar age performing in relation to that particular student. So we have what we call the criterion reference tests and the norm reference tests that can be used in being able to determine how students are progressing in a given learning environment. Of course, we also have summative assessments, which in essence really just sum up if a learner has met a specified level of proficiency or learning objective, And these are usually used at the end of the academic year, at the end of the academic cycle, to be able to give us a picture of how this learner is doing. But increasingly in the knowledge field, for all of us who are here, we have begun to embrace what we call continuous-based assessments, or what I'm calling here informal literacy assessments. So there is a new spin on being able to determine how learners are doing along the way, and not to wait until the end of the cycle to be able to determine. So these ones are more flexible for teachers to make decisions regarding the assessment, that they can be used, when they should be used, and how to interpret the findings. They can also be incorporated, so you're able to check in how a learner is speaking, how they are progressing in their speaking skills, their levels of confidence, their ability to collaborate with other learners in the classroom, their ability to listen with understanding. So these informal assessments give us a broader view of how a learner is progressing in the academics in comparison with some of the ones that I've mentioned earlier, like the high stakes or maybe the more summative assessments. So we have many different methods for being able to determine how a learner is doing in terms of their speaking skills, listening skills, or what we call the 4 macro skills. And of course, we've thrown in the idea of viewing. With the advent of technology, most students are, reading in non-traditional ways by viewing either television or going onto the internet. And of course, performing so that it's much more broader based when you think about the domains of learning. When you focus on the affective domain, you focus on the psychomotor domain, as well as the cognitive domain. So some of the assessments are moving away from the cognitive domain to get into the affective, and as well as the psychomotor domain, and performing then becomes lies within that domain. Of course, we have different methods for assessing literacy that fall somewhere between the informal, formal. And if you go to countries like the US, you will hear many of them talking about reading inventories, or the one that I used as a graduate student there was the qualitative reading inventory, that actually has a compilation of different sub-tests or sub-tasks of reading, including maybe having word lists. You can have a passage wherein the learners read and answer questions. And so those are more common place, and they are used to help to gauge how learner is doing, how the learner is progressing, rather than just focusing on reading assessment. They also look at the reading behavior, and they're much more broader based. In terms of reading, what we have seen more recently in Kenya, in many different African countries now that I'm involved in what is happening in the region, have been the use of EGRAS, early grade reading assessments. And for many countries, they have been used sort of like a screening, a diagnostic type assessment. It has gained traction. In the US, you'll probably just hear people talking about the DBELS, the dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. We have what they call the next edition, or they just call it the DBELS Next, is administered to all children at a certain grade level, say grade 1, to be able to determine how the children are progressing and to identify potential problems that they may be experiencing. And so it's a more universal kind of literacy screener. And we've been using a lot of that within countries. We've packaged it in different ways in Africa. I know, for example, in Kenya, we got the EGRA assessments that actually helped identify non-readers within our education system, and they got the government to listen and act, because they said, hey, we're having learners in grade 3 who are non-readers. And that was a diagnostic type of assessment which was a precursor to literacy interventions that were scaled up eventually from the different pilots that were being done in the country until eventually we had more like scaled up in all the public primary schools and low-cost private schools. We also have the, the standardized assessments like the Wechsler individual assessment test. These ones again are used in Western countries to be able to determine the gaps a learner has and to devise interventions, research-based interventions that can be used with the children. Some of the assessments that we have used in Africa, like the Egbe early grade reading assessments, have also been able to determine baselines of particular programs before they actually provide interventions once they determine what the gaps are. And so they have transitioned now to be more viewed as progress monitoring literacy assessments because they establish a baseline and intervention is provided. And one of the interventions that I've had people talking about within many different African countries, you will hear this word structured pedagogy thrown around quite a bit. So many of the interventions have had like a suite of activities which focus on the teacher, they focus on the materials to be used with the children, and therefore the assessment now comes in to be able to determine how is this learner progressing from the time we got the baseline data, how are the learners progressing towards the goals that have been set by whatever educational programs there is. So in many countries, you will now have, and I've seen this because it is a push from development partners, you have activities that are monitoring learner achievement, MLA, and so you will find we have certain programs that have been embraced by examination boards that are actually regularly checking in to see how the learners are doing across different African countries. I've seen them being reported. Of course, we have regional assessments, like in West Africa, I know we have the regional assessments in East Africa. We also have some Southern Africa, etc. All the different regions, they have some which are regional based. I remember one of the common ones is the SACMEC that captures, it used to capture about 12 to 16 countries. And so these are just daily checking in how either at a regional level, how learners are acquiring the skills, but also within country, the ministries of education through their examination boards have required that, the different team members put together these kinds of assessments. So they have moved from being screening assessments to being more those assessments which actually determine how the learners are progressing, to measure the extent to which they are actually at risk of future literacy-related problems if nothing is done, and therefore compelling education systems to do something. So when you think generally about types of literacy assessments, you will find that these assessments can either be classified as teacher-led or learner-led assessments. So the teacher-led assessments could include the informal inventory that I talked about, just observing how the children are reading, what is their reading habits like, or they can be much more intentional in terms of having an on-spot check, like providing a snapshot of how the learners are doing, or they can be summative that happen at the end. Increasingly, we are putting more responsibility in the hands of the learners. So some projects have designed learner-led assessments where these learners monitor their own learning, or they can monitor each other's learning. A simple example is where, for example, they can time each other to the minute. So in terms of their oral reading, they can time each other to see how they're progressing, or they can be able to assess each other. So when you think about innovative literacy assessments that have come in the region, I think the one that has received the most attention are the Egras, and that has revolutionized literacy in Africa in ways that have made development partners like USAID actually put money to those programs. They have intensified their collaboration with ministries of education to be able to augment the learning outcomes, which are the literacy outcomes and ultimately learning outcomes, because there is an interrelationship, literacy being the vehicle that then transports learning and all other academic areas. So really, to me, EGRA has been the buzzword in many countries in Africa. When I look to Ghana, in fact, it began Liberia, where RTI had an intervention, then it came further down to Eastern Africa, Southern Africa. There have been other assessments that are promoted by organizations like Save the Children, which they call Literacy Boost. It's sort of more like a package, not necessarily an assessment. But when you look at an innovative literacy assessment that lit the spark in Africa, you look at the EGRAS. Were they perfect assessments? No. The EGRAS have 5 subtasks. One of the subtasks focuses on letter knowledge, either the letter name or the sound. Then, of course, we have word knowledge, whether it is an authentic word or a non-word. Then, of course, we have an aspect of oral reading fluency and an aspect of reading comprehension. So that suite of subtasks have given a slice of how it is that many children are performing in different African countries. And it has actually caused a ripple effect, in the sense that it, or maybe a domino effect, if I may use a better word, which has stimulated finances that have been taken into literacy, and it continues to be used. Of course, it also inspired some critics and researchers who determined that it wasn't a very good measure of reading abilities. And so other people come in with other reading assessments that complement the EGRAS. So for example, USAID now has something they are calling receptive and expressive language module. So they have other ways of looking at the learner in ways that complement the EGRAS. So we can have teacher-led assessments or learner-led assessments. I just put here an example of a tool where maybe a teacher is using this to, let me just minimize so you can see, using this to be able to determine. So some of the assessments have, they're looking at a reading progress, so maybe words read correctly per minute usually is the measure for fluency. So when you look at this graph, you can see at baseline, this learner was reading less than 5 words per minute before the intervention. So they focus on the slope before the intervention. But when you look at the very top of that graph, beginning 2nd grade, so this was a 2nd grade learner, but at the beginning of 2nd grade, learners are supposed to be reading at maybe 52 words per minute. This one is reading less than 4 words, less than 5 words per minute. Of course, an intervention was provided, and you can see the dotted lines. This intervention seemed to work very well because this learner progressed, even though they had said, when you look at the solid line, they had determined that maybe this learner will acquire 1 additional word read correctly per week, but the learner actually exceeded the expectation But when you look at it, they had begun this assessment in September. You know, in the US, they begin the academic year in the fall, which is in August, September. But by the next year, when they were about to go for their summer break at the end of the year, I think it's spring, you find that this learner has not even met the benchmark of those who are beginning at second year, because they were beginning at 52 words. But by April of the next year, from September, by April of next year, this child is actually reading at about 45 words per minute. So this child is still reading below the rate of beginning readers at second grade. So the implication from this is that this intervention should have been intensified, because these children who began off reading 52 words per minute, by the end of the year, maybe they were reading 90 words per minute, you know? So this is a very good indicator when, for example, you're following up on different children and you're able to determine their baseline, and then you provide an intervention, and then you see how the child is progressing. Definitely, this is a lot of work for any teacher, but it gives you an idea of how the reading assessments can be used meaningfully to help a child, and also to inform the instruction. What else do you need to do so that this child can actually catch up the peers? If they're reading only, maybe let me say 4 words per minute, and the peers in grade 2 are reading 52 words per minute, this child is too far behind, and if nothing is done, they're going to fall even further behind. So assessments are that important, and therefore it is important that even as we think about assessments, we want to see how we can continually link those assessments to interventions that we have in the classroom. Whatever assessments that we have, we need to be able to link them with what is happening in the classroom. And of course, we need a wider lens to look at this learner, because at the beginning I said literacy is much wider than just reading. It's about listening, it's about speaking, it's about writing. So if you are to look at all these, you will definitely need different tools to be able to look in, and any innovative teacher should be able to do that and do it very well. So I'm now coming to this slide that I have titled "What's Hot and What Is Not." When you think about the education space in many countries in Africa, and we are latching on very quickly, we are moving towards what we call competency-based education, wherein learners have to demonstrate what they know and what they can do. Now, the implications in terms of the innovative literacy assessments that have been coming in the region, one of the things, and I'm circling back to the word I spoke about earlier called structured pedagogy. We have discovered that it doesn't matter the type of assessment you bring to the teacher that you want them to use. If they do not have the capacity to deploy that assessment, it will not be successful. So you will see that any interventions that are touching on innovative assessments, they actually begin with the teacher. You want to provide professional development and support to the teacher to be able to deploy this new assessment or innovative assessment, literacy assessment that you want to share with them. So for example, the EGRAs that lead the literacy space in Africa, many teachers had to be trained. Apart from enumerators who go to collect the data, we have had programs where we actually train the teachers to also administer mini EGRAs in the classrooms. When you think about the literacy boost, which is the other one that really did quite a lot in Southern Africa, I know they have done some work in Zambia, in Malawi, in South Africa, even in Zimbabwe. You will find that literacy boost gained traction there, and they had assessment tools that went along with it. But one of the winning ways, even as I draw to my conclusion, was to actually build the capacity of the teacher to be a better administrator of that examination, and to be able to the assessments, and to be able to report to the different clientele. How do they report this data to the parents, to the learners themselves, and to education system, Ministry of Education. So when you follow through this PowerPoint, you'll find that we have really focused in terms of the innovative literacy assessments, shifts in educator practice, so that they are offering developmentally appropriate instruction, but also offering developmentally appropriate assessments. They have become more efficient in their work and more effective in the sense that they are able to help the students achieve the milestones. When it comes to the assessments that focus on the learner, we have come up with the innovative literacy assessments that give us a better profile of what a graduate could look like. So when you look at the competency-based curriculum, for example, what would primary school graduates look like at the end of the primary cycle? And then now the learners are guided to be able to work towards that picture or mental picture of a graduate from such an education system. So you find that we have, for example, in Kenya, we have 4 sets of criteria where they will say this child does not meet expectations, this child is approaching expectations, this child is meeting expectations, or this child has exceeded. What are these expectations? They have the profile of what a graduate needs to look like. Increasingly, all these innovative assessments have focused on measurable competencies. So for example, when you think about socio-emotional learning, when you think about listening, how will you measure listening? How will you measure collaboration? So you will see some literacy interventions also throwing in something on listening, throwing in something on writing. They are coming up with measurable competencies. And then, of course, I already talked about formative assessment. The formative assessments, those are the ones, continuous based assessments, assessment for learning and assessment as learning, that are used in the classroom by the teacher so that they can adjust their instruction. So if a child is not able to follow instructions, what do you do differently in the classroom? But also increasingly, we are having, in regards to personalized instruction, some of the other literacy, innovative literacy assessments, where in, of course, using ICT, the children are able to go online, they're able to get into a program. Maybe they are learning something in literacy, and they are able to have mini assessments or quizzes that are integrated within the program so that they are able to determine their own growth. So for example, someone is learning grade 2 content, they'll probably have an assessment there which is teaching them how to match words, or just different fun activities that are aligned with personalized instruction, so that the students are, determining their own progress and being able to monitor their own progress. And so those would be within what we call assessment as learning, which are learner centers or learner focused, that provide personalized goals, self-paced learning. When you look at what we call the student agency, so the students now become much more active in determining how well they are doing in the learning, they are taking on more responsibility. They're not just sitting back. They have a stake in the education system. They are being given, the tools are being put in their hands. So for example, in any competency-based curriculum, there is usually a rubric. So you should be able to do this by the end of the program, and it's shared with the learner upfront so that the learner determines daily, am I working towards that goal or not? And then, of course, we have other assessments that are more hands-on, what we call project-based learning approach, where they will undertake different projects. They could have research questions that they pursue. They go into the community. They look for a real life problem, and they're able to undertake a project related to that. And then, of course, there is now the issue of once you've been assessed, we need to be able to know how you're doing, and you need to be able to, get a certificate to indicate that you've been able to achieve certain milestones. Okay, I know my time is up now. So basically, when you look at this diagram, it summarizes what is hot, what is trending in terms of the innovative literacy, as well as other academic. This can actually apply to any academic learning. But when you think about literacy, you're looking at assessments that provide agency to the student, that provide personalized instruction, that provide formative assessment for the teacher and learner, but that also reward the student. So you've had words like micro credentials being mentioned because you've achieved a particular milestone. So maybe you finished module 1, you'll get a certificate, and now you move on to module 2. And with all these assessments, then they have implications on the way a student is performing. So we have increased student autonomy. They are more responsible for their own learning, increased student competence because they can be able to challenge themselves if they're not doing very well. And then ultimately, we engage in what we call deeper learning. So really, these innovative literacy assessments, the ultimate goal is that the learners are engaging in deeper learning. What does that mean? They are successful in performing life roles when they graduate from school. They have acquired the 21st century skills, resilience, name it, grit. In terms of social-emotional learning, they're really on top of things. They're socially and emotionally intelligent, and then they engage in lifelong learning. They have mastered the standards that they have been set to them. They have academic knowledge. They are doing well in their academics. So really, we've seen, in short, we've seen different assessments that have come in to be able to determine how students are doing. And the innovative assessments can be informal, they can be formal, they can be formative, they can be summative, they can also be for screening, but they are now assessments that actually provide authentic information. Teachers are using these assessments to understand how they're doing in the classroom, what challenges there are and what they can do differently. And of course, the understanding and appreciation that only one tool cannot be used. So the teachers are needing to employ more than one tool in any teaching activity. And lastly, we know that these assessments are for educational decision-making. So our appeal usually is that teachers should gain a thorough understanding of the uses of these assessments or their misuses. There was something on the controversy here, the issue of over-testing. Sometimes, particularly in the US, there is the challenge of over-testing learners, but teachers, who are the most important change agents on the education workflow, they need to be able to know, but they need to gain experience on how to use these assessments, on how to interpret information obtained from the assessments and actually actively participate in achieving the learning outcomes that we desire to be able to achieve. And with that, members, then I bring back this slide as a way of just tying up what I have shared with us. When you look at assessment, please ensure that you're looking at the end result, which is deeper learning. Which innovative literacy assessments will lead to deeper learning? Thank you very much. listening to me.
Wow. A big thumbs up to Professor Hellen Inyega. That was expertly presented and very, very innovative assessment practices you have shared with us. Thank you so much for your time. We are going to go on straight to the second presentation, and thereafter we will take the questions and answer and comments, if you don't mind. So without much ado, let me have the privilege to welcome the second speaker for this webinar, a very, very renowned scholar and academic and professional. It is my pleasure to introduce to us Dr. Thomas de Vera Wolsey, who is a teacher of teachers and teaches graduate courses in research and literacy. He is a professional development for teachers in Egypt, Guatemala, Mexico, China, on the Hopi Reservation, and throughout most parts of the United States and other places in the world. He is an author and a co-author, and to his credit, he has about 12 books, and 2 fresh ones are coming very soon. He is the expertise in developing training materials for the California Department of Education text project, San Diego State University, and North County, all in San Diego, for beginning teacher support and assessment program. He also demonstrates expertise in exploring the intersection of literacy and technology, middle grades and secondary literacy practices, teacher preparation, and green school design. By fall this year, we shall be having 2 hot books coming from Dr. Wolsey, namely Teaching Refugees and Displaced Students, what every educator should know, that he is going to edit with Ibrahim Kakuti. And then the second one, Literacy in the Disciplines, a teacher's guide for grades 5 to 12, second edition of that book. He is also an editor with Diane Lab. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular pleasure to invite Dr. Thomas de Vera Wolsey to present to us Accelerating Learning Through Innovative Literacy Practices in Africa. Our guests, you have the floor.
Thank you. Give me just one moment, please, to switch the slides over. And I'm also going to put in the chat some links to these same slides. There you go. And this way, if you want to take a look at them later, you'll have access to them. And there's a little bit of additional information there as well that I'll refer to later on in the presentation. So thanks again for having me, for the invitation to be here. And let's begin here. Okay, so what we have is we wanted to talk a little bit about accelerating learning, and that's where the titles for Professor Hellen's and my presentations have come from. We hear a lot about learning loss and the sorts of things that are deficits and the things that kids can't do. We wanted to talk about the things that will accelerate the things, the literacy practices that students can do and that teachers can help them to be successful in this regard. Here's a QR code where you can download the PowerPoint slides you see here. and a little bit of extra information. And my email is there if you want to get in touch at any point in time. I put this slide at the end of the presentation as well, so that if you want to access it, you'll have a couple of opportunities to do that. So what I want to talk about for just a moment is effect size. This is a statistical calculation, but it's really important because in accelerating learning, we want to do more than what the normal practices would permit us to have happen. So effect size is just a way to compute two different variables and which one have the most impact on, in this case, student learning. We want to take a look at student achievement, and we want to take a look at other variables that might make it possible for students to do more than they would normally be expected or able to do because of the things that teachers are going to do. So let's see, I see we've got some chats here. Okay, and I'm going to just leave those for later on. But this is the formula. You don't have to worry too much about that particular formula, but here's what I think you want to know. Any effect size that is over 0.4 is going to be a stronger effect. So let's say we're going to look at student achievement and how that's impacted by something, for example, the use of feedback, which ties in very nicely with Professor Hellen's presentation on assessment, because that's what feedback is intended to build upon. We assess students' abilities in along a number of different parameters, but then we want to know what we can do to help the student to do more, to do better, to improve what the student has done well, and so on. Feedback, for example, has a very strong effect size, in some cases as much as 0.9. The important thing to look at here is that a 0.0 effect size is relatively weak. A very strong effect size is 1.0. Usually you see these up to 0.99 actually. 0.4 is 1 year's growth. So anything more than 0.4 is a very strong effect. So we're going to look at a number of studies. Well, we're not going to actually look at all of these studies. We've already assembled all of this information, and you can look at that in your leisure time. This comes from a set of studies by Dr. John Hattie from Australia. And what he analyzed was something a little over 530, I think it's 537 different studies. These are all quantitative studies, so that we can calculate the size of the effect on the various parameters. So in this case, he looked at a number of different things. For example, student factors, teacher factors, things that happen in students' homes, things that happen in school. He looked at strategies that are used by students for learning. He looked at the implementation methods for those strategies, and he looked at teaching strategies. Today, we want to look at teaching strategies because these are the things that teachers can do directly to improve students' learning if they're looking at those strategies that are that have a very strong effect size. That is more than 0.4. All right, so let's take a look here. There's teaching strategies. So let's take a look here at several different things. And some of you may recognize the teacher in this particular photo. This is from Uganda. And I swiped it without permission, by the way. But in any case, there are several things that teachers can do that will help improve student learning, and they have a really strong effect size. That means that they have more than 1 year's growth potential when implemented correctly. The first is success criteria. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. The second is direct instruction, the things that teachers do and say that help students to learn what they need to know. This comes from the work initially of a professor from way back in 1979, I think 1978 and 79 at the University of California, Los Angeles, where Dolores Durkin found that teachers spent in those days, teachers in particular in the United States and California spent a lot of time telling students what to do, but not instructing them how to do a particular task in reading. So that's what direct instruction is all about. Reciprocal teaching is a strategy that is specific to reading. Even though it doesn't have reading in the title, this is specifically about reading. It has an effect size of 0.74. So it's a very strong effect. In this case, in this example, a student who is working with a teacher and other students with reciprocal teaching, for example, can more than can use 1 year's growth and almost double that. It would be 0.8 actually if it were double. So it's not quite double the effect when reciprocal teaching is implemented correctly. The good news here for us is that success criteria, direct instruction, and reciprocal teaching have a layered effect. You can do all three of these things at the same time. And in this way, you can produce a really strong growth rate for students who may have fallen behind because they didn't have practice when schools were closed down, they didn't have books available to them, and so on. For example, in some schools that I worked with with the teachers in Guatemala, their schools were closed down for almost 2 solid years, and the students could come one-on-one with the teacher. So we arranged to get books into the teacher's hands, and they would then exchange those for the students who would take a book home, work with their brothers and sisters, with their parents, and then return to the next week. So they would always have something to read. But this was a minimal effort. And we know that this happened all around the world, in the United States, everywhere that has schools, they were affected by the COVID pandemic. We wanted to talk a little bit about feedback also, but that's probably a discussion for another time. So let's take a look at success criteria. Success criteria are the things that we say to students that they can understand, what it is they're supposed to do, what it is that a good performance actually looks like. And we often say things like the students will be able to, but we don't say it in a way that students can know and understand. And I'll show you some examples of that in just a minute. Direct instruction is also the ability for the teacher to say exactly what something looks like and how it should be done, rather than just giving directions, such as complete the worksheet, read this book, and then be prepared to talk about it in class, and so on. And they both directly impact the ability of teachers to help students facilitate their reading ability through reciprocal teaching. And you'll see why it's called reciprocal in just a moment. Success criteria are the things that we want students to know, but we state it in such a way that students can understand and see in their heads what it is that's important. I have this photo that says yo puedo, which is yes, I can, in Spanish. And I didn't change it out for this group, but because I like the colors and what it says, but it also is the whole idea is, yes, I can do something. And students can say, I can do a thing, then they should be able to have a better understanding of what it is. What's important is our intention as a teacher. What's important is the learning experience of the students. If the students aren't learning, or they're not learning very well, or they're confused all the time, then they're going to have a problem, and we haven't done our jobs well. And that's what constitutes the success criteria. For example, in red, you'll see that this is a common objective that teachers, and this might be a secondary school. I'll show an elementary example in a moment. So we have students will be able to write a persuasive argument. Well, this is great. If you're a teacher, you know exactly what that means. You know what persuasive argument means. You know what it means to write a persuasive argument and all of that. But if you're a student and you've never written a persuasive argument, and you maybe you've read one, but you didn't realize what was effective about it, this is not a very successful criteria, because students can't really visualize what it is they're supposed to do. In black, I've written, I can use persuasive vocabulary. And notice I can. That's the important part of this. I, the student, can do this thing. I can use persuasive vocabulary, which allows me to express my thoughts, points of view, ideas, and opinions about topics outside my own experience. Now, if students can say that, and they can understand what persuasive argumentation is all about, they have a better chance of doing a good job with writing a persuasive essay or persuasive argument, or a speech for that matter. So that's one example. Here's another example. This is related to comprehension and the length of text. We all know that students really like to take the thinnest little book they can find, in particular if they're not really good at reading, because they know that they can read that rather quickly and it's probably easier and so on. But we also want to push them. We want to nudge them to read longer books, longer texts, longer articles, and be able to comprehend them and put all of the information gathered in one space. So a teacher objective in red might be the students can read long texts and comprehend them. Well, this is great. Maybe students understand long texts because they tend to avoid them if they're not really good at reading anyway. But comprehend them. Well, how do you do that? If I'm a student, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do when I'm comprehending. I get the idea that it has something to do with understanding, but how do I know? So success criteria for reading long texts and comprehending them is I can retell the main points in my own words. If a student can say, I can retell the main points in my own words, and then they can actually do that, then they have understood at least partially what comprehension actually means. Another example, I can infer some things in the text that the author does not say directly. That's part of comprehension. That's making inferences. And so when a student can say, I can infer some things in the text that the author does not say directly, then they also have a better chance of actually being able to make those sorts of inferences. Does this make sense? For us as teachers, these objectives are often very abstract, but we understand them because we've been teaching this for a long time. We went to teacher preparation programs. We've got all the teacher guides. What's in red, the objective, is very clear to us. What's not clear is what the students need to do in order to be successful with those objectives. So we want to rephrase these. We want to be very specific. We want to make our intention as a teacher very clear to the students so they know what a successful performance actually looks like. That's what success criteria means. And teachers who use success criteria are far more likely to have students who are able to read and comprehend or to write and express their thoughts in ways that students who don't have this success criteria for them laid out, they're going to stumble like I just did. They're going to stumble a little bit and they won't know exactly what it is that they're trying to do. So they're not very focused in it as well. One of the things I wanted to mention really briefly was the use of models. And when we're teaching reading, we need to model behaviors very often. I have a longer presentation on this that we'll do another time. But the idea of models is that we model our thinking. We tell students what we're questioning. We're asking, we're modeling for students, what kinds of questions we have, what sorts of predictions we have, and so on. And so I wanted to mention that. You're going to see that pop back up here when we start talking about reciprocal teaching in just a moment. This is where reciprocal teaching actually comes in. When we have direct instruction coupled with success criteria, we have a model for helping students to become successful with reading comprehension. In this particular case, we're much more likely to be successful with helping students to read well. And remember what the effect size was for reciprocal teaching alone. For reciprocal teaching alone, it was 0.74, which is nearly double 1 year's growth when implemented successfully. All right, so we want to be really clear about that. What is reciprocal teaching? Several years ago, and this is actually a long time ago now that the research was actually done, two researchers named Palangsar and Brown looked at the cognitive things that students do when they're reading, and if they're reading effectively, when they're comprehending and so on. They found 4 of these, and then there's one additional that I've added at the bottom as well. They found that students who are reading with comprehension are asking questions. They realize that sometimes what they were thinking they would learn isn't actually in the reading, or at least it isn't yet. They found that sometimes students who ask questions about, as if they were questioning the author of the text, are more likely to read and understand because they're actively engaged. They found that students who predict what's going to happen based on the title, based on pictures, and based particularly on the text that they have read already is very powerful in helping students to make sense of text. And in making sense of the text, of course, they have learned to comprehend that text. They've also found that students pay attention and they hold in their heads the information that's being conveyed, whether it's fiction, whether it's nonfiction, whether it's a novel, or whether it's exposition about a science topic, whatever it is, that when they're reading and they hold in their heads information about what they have read so far, that very often they also clarify questions that they have asked before, or that their prediction may not have been exactly spot on. And this is the way that they learn to read. It's a kind of an input theory where they have some information and they take that information and they wonder, hey, I'm wondering if I've predicted this text successfully. Later on, they found out that yes, they have, no, they haven't, and so on. They also found that students who stop and summarize. Have you ever been reading a textbook, an article, something from an online news magazine or whatever, and you got to the end of a page or the end of the column and you wondered, what did I just read? I have no idea what I just read. This happens to me all the time. My mind wanders or it's really complicated. So if I stop and summarize, if I can do that, if I can stop and summarize, that forces me to go back into the reading and think about what I have already learned. And also it helps me to understand what I might need to focus on if I can't quite summarize effectively. So these are the 4 strategies that they found that good readers do when they're comprehending, and tons of studies have supported this. There's been some newer work on visualizing that we won't talk about today, but these are the 4 things that we found that students do when they're, well, any reader does when they're actually reading and comprehending, and they work across the grade levels. Whether you're teaching 12th grade or 5th grade doesn't really matter, because the material is continually and should be continually more complex, more challenging, and more difficult for students. So these are the sorts of things that students need to continually do, and they need continual support in this way. Why is it called reciprocal teaching? That's the main thing that you're probably wondering now if you haven't heard of this before, or sometimes we get used to using the words for a particular teaching strategy and we forget why it's called a certain thing. It's reciprocal because initially the teacher does a lot of the modeling. They might say, as I'm reading, that I'm wondering about this particular aspect of the reading. I'm wondering why. Let's see if I can think of an example here really quickly from something that you all might have read recently. I'm wondering why the article is talking about summer heat in Europe and in the United States, in places that don't normally have these huge, extremely difficult temperatures. And I'm wondering just what are the interactions that are going on. And the teacher has to say these sorts of things because, as you remember, we talked about modeling and how important it is for students to see and understand what it is, excuse me, what it is that a good proficient model looks like. And we're going to give them some opportunities for success criteria. For example, I'm going to collapse this for just a minute. I can make predictions based on what I already know from the text or the title. This is something that students should be able to say. And then they should be able to do that because they know what a good prediction looks like. I can make predictions based on what I already know from the text or the title. I can ask questions that connect what I have learned from the text so far with what I still do not know. I can clarify my thoughts. All of these are I can statements. They're success criteria that show students exactly what it is they're supposed to be doing that would be successful. I can clarify my thoughts when I connect ideas from different places in the text and from my knowledge of the world. Or I can summarize a passage of the text that includes the main ideas that the author intends to convey. So I think you can see from these success criteria that it's not just enough to say to students, you need to make a prediction. We also have to say, this is what a prediction is supposed to, this is what you're supposed to do when you make a prediction. This is what a good question might look like. So they have a clear understanding of what that performance looks like. So they don't have to flounder around and hope that what they're doing is the right thing. This is the power of reciprocal teaching. First, the teacher does a lot of this modeling by modeling aloud in small groups or in a fishbowl sort of a situation. In a fishbowl, you probably do this all the time. This is a term that probably came from the United States, but I really don't know for sure. We have a small group inside a circle like this and sitting around with the teacher, and they're conducting a reading exercise, but then a larger group is out and they're watching what's going on so they can hear what the students say and what the teacher says and so on. The teacher does a lot of modeling right at first. In these particular cases, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to ask a question about global warming, et cetera, and so on. So these are the sorts of success criteria that we can help students to see something that's really very difficult to see in the main. For example, we can't see what's going on in students' brains. We can only see the things that they're actually doing when they're making predictions, whether they're writing predictions or whether they're saying them aloud. This is how students would know that what they're doing, making a prediction, asking a question, and so on, is really the right sort of thing to be doing. So let's see. This is where we want to start to scaffold away. Notice here over on the right-hand, or I'm sorry, the left-hand side of your screen, that we have a teacher read aloud. And this is the traditional, just superimposed on the traditional I do, we do, you do situation, where students slowly move things from the teacher doing all of the work to the students doing almost all of the work, which is what we want. When students become proficient at those sorts of cognitive strategies, predicting, questioning, clarifying, summarizing, and later visualizing, we want them to be doing the work. But at first, we do the work so that they can see the model. Later, we give them opportunities for fishbowls where they see that the other students and the teacher are using these particular strategies, and they see how they interact, because it's not just a lockstep, though very often it seems like that at first. And that's where we have to show students, today you're the summarizer, student A is the summarizer, student B, you're going to be the predictor. But later on, these become very interactive and they become very organic. And that's where this release of responsibility comes in. This is the train the trainers model is one of my favorites. I used to very often ask a small group of students when I was introducing something new to come sit up around my desk, for example, when I was a teacher, and I would train that small group of students, maybe 5 students, in the procedures. They became the experts at, in this case, reciprocal teaching. They became the experts at making predictions, asking questions, summarizing and clarifying information. And then they went back and they became the teacher in the group. So already I've released responsibility to this small group of students I've trained. And this way I can make a really big impact on the entire class. Because you know how it is when you've got a class of 30 or in some cases even 50 or 60 students, you can only keep the attention of maybe 10 to 15% at any one time. And this way, all of the students have their own teacher, which is a student that I've trained to be the teacher in this particular case. They break out into small groups, and slowly and more slowly, we're releasing more and more responsibility. First by me doing it as the teacher, next by the students collaborating together with my support. A lot of support from me. I might be moving around the small groups, or I've trained the other students to become the trainers of the group, and so on. But eventually we want students to be able to read independently using those strategies. And that's what this gradual release of responsibility is all about. It allows the student to become the owner of the strategy, in this case, reciprocal teaching, and it's 4 cognitive strategies of questioning, clarifying, predicting, and summarizing. So that's the very short version. We can certainly do longer, more involved versions, and I'd love to do some practice exercises with this, because it's using reciprocal teaching is an organic thing, but it takes a lot of practice so that you don't just do a rote sort of you're the predictor today and all your job is to make predictions. Instead, we want students doing all 4 of these sorts of things while they're reading on their own or when they're reading with small groups and so on. Let's see if we can find, there's the handout once again. If you want to get to grab that would be fantastic. And you can also see some of this work on Literacy Beat, and some of it's in Spanish. I don't know that that'll be really useful to you, but in case it is, it's available on Literacy Beat in Spanish. And if you look at the slides in app.box.com, you'll also see that there's an example that I provided because I knew I wouldn't have a whole lot of time. I provided an example from the upcoming book on literacy and the disciplines that helps you understand how it is that the teacher releases the responsibility, at the same time encouraging the interaction amongst the students and with the 4 strategies. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Professor Gabriel, and we'll stop sharing.
Okay, thank you so much, Tom. That was very timely. You kept to the time so expertly. Thank you so much. I think we'll now open the floor for comments and questions. We'll take it in this way. We've listened to Professor Hellen speak to us about accelerating learning through innovative literacy assessment practices. And we've listened to Tom talk about accelerating learning through innovative literacy practices in Africa. If you want to ask any question or want to make a comment, you can use the icon to raise your hand, or you can type your question on the chat, and we'll make it available to the presenters. So any option you prefer is available. You can raise your hand, and then we'll let you ask your question or make your comment, or you type on the chat box, and the presenters will take it up from there. So the floor is open for the first 3 or so questions or comments before we take the next batch of comments and questions. So, yes, Leonard, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, the professor and the previous speakers. Surely, the presentation was so insightful. And my name is Bikorgom Leonard, and I am the Technical Associate, Reading Association of Uganda. I am very glad that Professor Tom has elaborated and highlighted more about the reciprocal teaching. Surely you realize that this is the best way of doing it. First of all, it makes students predict, and then they ask questions based on what they have seen from the title. They clarify their thoughts in connecting them from the ideas and the places they have got from the text, and then at the end of it all, summarize. My concern, which I need to get very well, was actually on the pyramid, because the first step was I do, we do, and then we do in a way of a collaboration. So I would like to know how the two differ, because they look similar here, where we do it and then we do it together in collaboration. I would seek for more clarification from Dr. Tom. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Leonard. I hope, Tom, you got the question. Did you get the question, Tom?
Yeah, I'm thinking that what you have is this slide is the slide that the question.
Yes, yes. There are two we do there. So he wants you to clarify the two we do, how they differ.
Right. Okay. And okay. Yeah, I need to make that a little more elaborated, I think. In the upper part, fishbowl and train the trainers, the teacher still has a lot of responsibility, but the students have assumed some of that responsibility because they are becoming the trainers for other students, or they're modeling the behaviors with the support of the teacher. So this is really, we do it, the teacher and the students together. And then the next group with the small groups is mainly the students do it together with the teacher observing. And I think that's the main difference, that slowly, bit by bit, we're turning all of the responsibility for the thinking, for the reading, the comprehending over to the students. And we're doing that through the reciprocal teaching model. Does that help, Leonard?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's clear. Please, Tom, somebody asked in the chat what you mean by a fishbowl. So can you explain what is a fishbowl? What do you mean by that? He wants to know. Somebody.
I saw that comment about fishbowl, and here's how I would do that. I wouldn't use a really long passage for a fishbowl, because students will be bored because they have to watch. And we don't want to ask students to spend a whole lot of time watching when they really should be doing, in this case, doing the reading that's required for them. So in a fishbowl, you have a very small group, maybe 5 students and the teacher. And the teacher models the predicting, questioning, clarifying, and the students also try to make predictions, questions to summarize. And you might say, Professor Gabriel, can you summarize this section we just read, for example? Or you might say, Professor Hellen, maybe you have a prediction about what you think will happen next. And the teacher prompts the students this way. A larger group of students is sitting outside, and they're watching and might have a checklist. They might have a list of things the teacher does, the things the students do that are predicting, questioning, clarifying, summarizing those cognitive strategies. And so they have to check off when those things occur. This way they kind of are paying attention. Okay, so that's what a fishbowl is. But if you do a long passage, pretty soon the children will become bored with it when they really need a model of the behavior, and then they need to be doing it with their own small groups on their own as they move forward. Hopefully that's a little helpful.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, so the floor is still open for questions. You can raise your hand or you type on the chat box, whichever is acceptable.
Professor Egbe?
Yes, Edith.
There's a question in the chat, which is targeting Professor Inyega. It's saying, thanks, Helen, for the presentation. The effectiveness of any teaching is most often shown through assessment. However, can all these assessment types be used at all levels of education? Thank you.
So Helen, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Amadi, for asking that question. I reiterate here, the effectiveness of any teaching is most often shown through assessment. True. Can all these assessment types be used at all levels of education? Yes. We have determined that these different strategies can be used at different levels of the education system. Of course, the complexity will differ. So for example, children in grade 1, you can use multiple choice questions. You can use the same at the university. At the advent of COVID-19, we found that when we went to online teaching, we began setting multiple choice questions, and then you can actually make them very complex, higher order, tapping into analysis. So it just depends on the complexity of the assessments. They can be used at all levels. And, you know, the teacher will determine the purpose for which they're using the assessment to be able to choose from the array of those available to determine which one to use. So yes, they can be used.
Thank you, Helen. I think Professor Chinwe Modumogo's hand is up. Chinwe, you can go ahead and ask your question or make your comment.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, Helen, Tom, how are you?
Nice to see you.
Fine, Chinwe, Prof.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Tom and Helen, it's been a very, very engaging lecture. We've learned so much. And I'm just going to say, should we have this only when we celebrate African Day? Or can we make it more often? Because actually we need to develop, like we say in IDCA, what strategies are we propagating in the teaching of literacy skills? We should identify what works for us. And then kind of like we are doing now, Helen, scale it up so that everybody gets to know. We'll get to make some changes. That's the point I want to make. And then people have been on and off this program because of the network. So I'm wondering if those of you who are the hosts can broadcast this on the IDCA platform for people to see. I don't know whether in the form of the spoken part of it or the written form. I will need more people to read what transpired today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chinwe. Of course, I think Edith will work with the team to see how we can have access to either the PowerPoints or the recording. Yeah, so I think that will be very helpful because in some areas, connections can be quite problematic. You are on and off. I know Chinwe was off and on 3 times. So we understand that. Okay, so Chinwe, you can bring your hand down so we don't see your hand.
Sorry. Sorry.
Okay. All right, so the floor is still open for others who have questions and comments. I thought I saw Dr. Andima's hand somewhere. George, I saw your hand somewhere, or your comment. Okay.
Thank you, Prof. It was my comment, not my hand.
I know I saw my daddy's hand somewhere, so whatever, whether I comment or hand, I saw you somewhere.
Well,
I was going to say that his hand should be preparing for us to come to Kenya, not be here.
thank you. Now that you provoked me to say a thing, this was a very wonderful presentation. Indeed, listening to what Professor said, Professor Hellen has said, listening to what Thomas said, you get a glimpse of what it takes to have, you know, a successful literacy program, beginning from the teaching, going to the assessment. Then you're able to assess, you're able to see what the progress that learners are making. That is what I wanted to say. I'll be speaking later about the PALFA conference.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andima. Yes, so the floor is still open. We can still take 2 or more questions or comments before we invite our boss to say something. Okay. I think there's I can see a chat there. I don't know if you can, Edith, can you read it? Can you read the chat we have there? Somebody is saying something, I can't see it very well.
Okay, let me just check it.
I would like to try, but my challenge is that the class size, I have more than 100 students in my class. So Tom, can you help that person? He say he has 100 students in his class. Is there any way that he wants to know if he can use a fishbowl with over 100 students in his class? You know, class size.
What you find, I think, with that, I've done this, but never with 100 children. I've done it with adults, and sometimes they're harder than children. But you can do this depending on the size of your classroom and the situation. But the main challenge here is keep it brief so that students see the behaviors. This is what a summary looks like. This is what a prediction looks like, and so on. But it's got to be brief, because otherwise you're going to lose 95 of those kids' attention really quickly. And the other challenge will be that all of the children who are in the fishbowl, who are doing the modeling with the teacher, they're going to have to speak really loudly. Kids don't naturally project their voices when they're performing, which is what this sort of is. They do it on the playground, of course, but when they're up in front of their peers, they're not likely to use their teacher projecting voices, and they'll be very quiet and nobody can hear them. So you'll need students who are willing to participate and speak loudly, or maybe with a video would be another good example. There's some good examples of videos on YouTube. I think I've got one that maybe I can share at some point. I'll try to do that with the recording. When we send the recording out, I'll try to include that video of that link from, I think I can't remember. We just put it in the literacy, in the disciplines book, but I can't remember what it was. I've just read so much, I've forgotten which one we put in there, but I'll look it up and add that to the list.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah. Is it realistic to, oh, it's gone. I saw a question there, whether it's realistic to do what?
It's saying, is it realistic to rate a child as above expectation in all the subjects?
Is that Helen's question?
No, that's Geraldine's question.
I mean, is it meant for Helen, because it just took about assessment. I don't know whether it's Helen who answered that question. Helen, can you try that?
Yeah, Helen can answer that, yes, thank you.
Hello, Helen. Good.
Yes, sorry. In the real world, you cannot be evenly unsuccessful in all the activities you do. Patrin, please mute.
Sorry about that. Just go ahead, Helen. Sorry.
So I was just saying that in any education endeavor, there's no student who cannot perform in all the learning areas. In fact, when you do the assessment, you may find that, say, in literacy, this learner may exceed expectation, but in social studies, they are approaching expectation, for example. Just like the fingers of our hands that are different, really. In the academic programs, you'll find children who are different based upon different academic areas. Their abilities might differ in different subjects. So you cannot find a student who is just below average in everything. And if they're below average in everything, then you should ask, do they have an additional problem? Do they need to go beyond screening now to diagnose what the issues are? Maybe there are other underlying issues like their level of emotional intelligence, their level of cognitive mental ability might be low. So you want to be able to investigate further. Why are they below average in all the learning areas? It's not possible.
Thank you, Helen. Well, thank you, Helen. That's a good one. So yeah, can we take one or two more before we invite Edith to speak with us? Is there anybody who has a comment or question before we turn it over to Edith? Okay, I think it has been a wonderful session. It's my pleasure to invite our chair, IDC Africa, Edith Ngoma, to please share some good news with us and for us.
Thank you so very much, Professor Egbe. I'm getting some feedback. Okay. Thank you so very much. To start with, I would like to thank the keynote speakers, Professor Hellen Inyega and Dr. Tom Wolsey, the representatives from International Literacy Association, the International Development for Africa IDCA committee members, the affiliates from Africa, and all the participants present here, especially our dear teachers. My name is Edith Ngoma from Zambia, and I am the current chairperson for the International Development Committee for Africa, which hereafter I will refer to as IDCA. For the benefit of those who may not know what IDCA is, this is a committee in Africa that represents one of the 7 International Literacy Association regions outside of North America. We have over 10 literacy associations that are affiliated to this committee and the International Literacy Association. It is an honor indeed and a great privilege that I have to say a big thank you on this very important occasion. And I must ride on Professor Chinwe's sentiment that this should be done more often. I think this is something we can discuss and see how we can provide such webinars to our teachers more often. It has been very helpful. I would like to thank all the IDCA members for always being there and working as a team when it matters most, such as putting together this event. This event, which has been dubbed Africa Day Literacy Webinar, has been organized by IDCA. It was inspired by the logic of Africa Day, which is celebrated in May every year. This is the second event that we are holding after the first one that was held last year and had Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o as our guest speaker. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as you may know, Africa Day is celebrated annually on the 25th of May to commemorate the political liberation of the African continent. It is in this regard that we get topics that enhance our children's literacy levels. We had 2 topics today, one to do with accelerating learning through innovative literacy practices in Africa, and which was done by Dr. Wolsey, and the second topic, accelerating learning through innovative literacy assessment practices with Professor Inyega. Ladies and gentlemen, to achieve 100% literacy levels for at least those that are coming behind us, we need to put in all the efforts and implement what we are trained to do in addition to what we have learned today. These topics are timely in the sense that Africa needs to be liberated, not only politically, but also in all other facets of human endeavor, including literacy education. To our distinguished keynote speakers, Professor Hellen Inyega and Dr. Tom Wolsey, we would like to say a big thank you for having left your busy schedules to come and educate us on our desire to accelerate learning through innovative literacy practices and assessment in Africa. For most of us, this will be a turning point to the way we look at education literacy in Africa. Your rich keynote presentations have given us new insights, which I do not intend to repeat here for fear of watering them down. The ideas you have shared will not only help build our capacities in many ways, but also research topics will be birthed. Once again, thank you in large measure, Professor Inyega and Dr. Wolsey. May we humbly request that you keep your doors open. Well, this is not the last time we are calling on you to speak to us on such matters, as we have made the Africa Day webinar an annual event. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar would not have taken place without the support of one distinguished organization, the International Literacy Association. We would also like to thank Dr. Wolsey, who ensured that we were all connected for this webinar. Apologies to those whose network was failing them. To the representative of ILA here present, kindly convey our utmost gratitude to the leadership of this organization. To our own members of IDCA, your contribution to the preparations for the webinar is a clear testimony of your unwavering commitment to improving literacy levels in Africa. For this, I say a big thank you. Finally, IDCA, as the organizers of the event, are excited to note that we have had participants from over 10 countries in Africa. To all of you, we are saying thank you very much indeed. Your participation is a clear demonstration that the topic we chose for discussion is close to our hearts. To our able moderator, Professor Gabriel Egbe, thank you, and thank you again for coming on board and making this webinar a success. You have excelled in doing your job, sir. May I also take this opportunity to make one announcement. This year, on the 23rd to 25th of August, we have the 13th biannual Pan-African Literacy Conference for All, which will be held in Nairobi, Kenya, at the University of Nairobi. I must say, we announced earlier last year that we would hold this conference in Egypt, but due to circumstances beyond our control, we had to change the venue. Once again, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, and good night to all of you. The link for the website and the conference will be shared in the WhatsApp group so that those who want more information about the conference can just visit the website, and you'll find all the information that you require, and there are numbers that you can get in touch with in case you have any clarifications to make. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye. Over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Edith, I think George wanted to say something. I don't know whether he's still there. So can we invite George to just make a few remarks before we draw the curtain? Dr.
Yes, if George is available, it will be good so that he can throw more light on the PALFA 2023 conference. George
is there.
Oh, good.
Your granddad is there.
Thank you, Madam Edith. I had indicated that I will be traveling, and you can see indeed I'm traveling.
Yes.
But thank God today the network did not misbehave. I followed through presentations which were really quite exciting. I felt like they had started the conference. It was kind of a pre-conference presentation. the presentations were quite exciting. Just like you said, the conference planning has really done a lot of work. We are now sure everything is working, apart from your traveling. We want you to travel because on the ground things are really planned very well. So far, in terms of the virtual registration, we have over 17 countries represented, and we have over 100. We have 113 delegates who have already registered. We expect to have more numbers. Please tell your networks to connect, to register, so that we can make the conference a big success. Indeed, there are those who did not send their abstracts, but they want to attend to understand what is happening. They are welcome. We have both physical attendance and we also have virtual attendance. So equally go to the website. It will have quite a number of options for you to see how you can attend physically or you can attend virtually. More exciting, I'm looking forward to meeting my son in Nairobi, Professor, and also I wish to share with Chinwe, Professor Chinwe. When you come to Nairobi, you dress warm. You can see the way I'm dressed. This is partially, it's a bit warm today. So don't come dressed like Tom was. You may end up getting to freeze in Nairobi. We don't want to see you frozen. So far, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Edith, for all the organization. Thank you for standing in and making sure everything is working. We look forward to hosting you in Nairobi, and it will be exciting to see all of you. Bye.
So I think we have come to the end of this presentation. We thank Tom and Helen and Edith and everybody who has made this day possible. We look forward to meeting all of us in Nairobi, if we can make it, or at least to the conference, virtually or on site. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.